The ruins of the London Underground harbored many secrets. Ilara had heard the stories whispered in her settlement, stories of long-forgotten tunnels beneath the city, where the earth had swallowed trains whole, and shadows still moved through the dust of a lost world. She had never believed them, not until the day she found herself standing at the entrance of the old underground station, the wind howling through the broken glass above her head. She was only 16, but the world no longer cared for the ages of children. After the collapse, the old lines of time and history had blurred. Now, it was just survival. And Ilara was good at surviving. Her boots crunched over the rubble as she descended the stairs into the forgotten depths. Overhead, daylight dimmed as she moved deeper into the bones of the city. The walls were caked in grime and streaks of rust, but she could still make out the faded names of places she would never know: Piccadilly, Waterloo, Charing Cross. She had heard once that people used to travel through these tunnels, thousands of them every day, in a time when the world was still whole. It seemed like madness now. The stale air smelled of mildew and rot. Ilara pulled her scarf tighter around her face, muffling the scent. Her flashlight flickered in her hand, casting a pale beam into the darkness ahead. She had come to find supplies, food, batteries, maybe even an old generator if she was lucky. Her people needed them. But more than that, she came because something deep inside her wanted to understand what this place had been before the fall. As she reached the platform, she paused. The station stretched out in both directions, swallowed by shadows. There were no signs of life, but Ilara knew better than to trust silence. She crouched behind a crumbling pillar, listening, her ears tuned to every creak and shift of the decaying structure. Nothing. Just the steady drip of water somewhere deep in the tunnels. She allowed herself to breathe again and stood, moving towards the derelict train cars that still sat on the tracks like the skeletal remains of some great beast. The windows were shattered, and graffiti marked the rusting metal. She stepped inside one of the cars, her flashlight sweeping across empty seats and littered debris. Then she saw it, a faint, glowing mark on the floor near the door. It was small, barely noticeable unless you knew what to look for. A symbol. She knelt to examine it closer. It was etched into the grime, a circle with an arrow through it, pointing down into the depths of the tunnel. Her heart skipped a beat. The symbol had been whispered about in the settlement, the mark of the Hollow Ones, a group of scavengers who had long disappeared into the tunnels after the collapse, rumored to have found something beneath the city. A power, a treasure, something worth killing for. No one had ever come back from looking for them. Ilara felt a cold thrill run down her spine. She wasn't looking for trouble, but if the Hollow Ones still existed, they could have resources, food, weapons, things her people desperately needed. She could turn back now and never speak of this. Or she could follow the symbol. She hesitated only for a moment before stepping off the platform and onto the tracks. The arrow pointed into the deeper darkness, where the tunnels stretched on for miles, an endless labyrinth beneath the bones of London. The ground was slick, the air damp and heavy, but Ilara pressed on, her flashlight her only guide. Minutes passed. The further she went, the more the walls seemed to close in. Strange shapes flickered at the edge of her vision, shadows playing tricks on her mind. She heard whispers, though she couldn't tell if they were real or just her own breath echoing back at her. And then, she saw it, another mark, this time painted on the tunnel wall. The same symbol. The arrow pointed to an iron gate partially hidden by debris. She pushed it open with a creak that echoed down the tunnel. Beyond it, a narrow stairwell spiraled downwards, carved into the very earth. She hesitated, but the pull of the unknown was too strong. Step by step, she descended, until the air became thick with heat and something else, something faintly metallic. Her flashlight sputtered, and for a moment she was plunged into darkness. Panic surged in her chest, but she shook it off and banged the flashlight against her hand. The light flickered back to life, and she saw what lay at the bottom of the stairs. A chamber, vast and ancient, opened before her, filled with the remnants of a civilization that had once thrived in secret. Machines, their purpose long forgotten, lined the walls, their metal frames tangled with vines that had somehow taken root underground. But at the center of it all was something more, a massive, glowing orb suspended in the air, its surface pulsing with an energy unlike anything she had ever seen. Ilara took a step closer, her heart racing. This was it. This was what the Hollow Ones had been searching for. But as she approached, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Voices, not from the tunnels, but from within her own mind. They spoke of power, of knowledge, of a world rebuilt in her image. Her hand reached out before she could stop herself, drawn to the orb's light. But just as her fingers brushed its surface, a figure stepped from the shadows, a man, his face gaunt and hollow, his eyes dark with madness. "You shouldn't have come here," he rasped. Ilara froze, her hand still hovering over the orb. She could feel its warmth, its pull, but she forced herself to look at the man. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He smiled, a twisted, broken thing. "I am what's left of the Hollow Ones," he said. "And now, so are you." Before she could react, he lunged, shoving her hand against the orb. The world exploded in light, and Ilara's scream was swallowed by the ruins of the London Under.